notice I start every meeting and don't introduce myself. My name is Charlotte King, and I'm currently the chair of the Southern Delaware Alliance for Racial Justice, but that should be changing within, and family, that should be changing within this year. I'm going to turn the rest of the meeting over to Drew McKay and Sherry Toll, who will introduce the panel.
I'm good, thank you. Good evening, everyone. How are you? Let me introduce myself. My name is Sherry Toll Hubbard. I'm a retired captain from the Wilmington Police Department. Yay! I am currently the president of the Delaware chapter of NOBLE. NOBLE stands for the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives. We currently have about 65 chapters across the United States. We have chapters in the Virgin Islands as well as the UK. So it's an organization that's built on law enforcement from here, like I said, across the United States. We meet yearly. We have local chapters. We also participate in the first collegiate chapter. We have a chapter here at Delaware State University, which we're so proud of. We get a chance to interact with the young people who are interested in becoming law enforcement, whether it's state, local, and federal agencies. So we also do, when I say us, NOBLE Delaware chapter, we do community outreach. We also do workshops, and for the young people at Del State, we introduce them to this career. We do academies for them, trainings for them, resume writings for them. We do outreach, like I said, to the community. So we're here in this community here, from here all the way up to Pennsylvania. And we're so proud tonight that you have invited us to Southern Delaware Alliance for Racial Justice for this town hall meeting. So without further ado, let me introduce the panel to you. And when each one introduces himself, just tell us a little bit about your organization, please, so we can know who you are. The first one is Commissioner Phelps. He is Department of Corrections. Colonel McQueen, who's at the very end, from Delaware State Police. Chief R.L. Hughes, Georgetown Police Department, and Chief of Delaware Capital Police is Captain, I demoted him tonight, Chief Michael Hertzfeld. Gentlemen, will you introduce yourselves, please? Thank you.
It's a mic thing, you wouldn't understand. All right, my name is Perry Phelps. I'm the current commissioner of the Delaware Department of Correction. And just a little bit about the agency. In the state of Delaware, we run a unified correction system, which means there's no city, county lockups. Everything is straight committed to the Delaware Department of Correction. We are currently the second largest executive branch agency in the state of Delaware, and we're the largest law enforcement agency in the state of Delaware with over 2,100 correction and probation officers. And we have 4 bureaus, and each bureau has its own chief. We have the Bureau of Prisons, which is our largest bureau. We have the Bureau of Community Correction, which includes probation and parole. And we have the Bureau of Administrative Services and the Bureau of Healthcare Services. We have about 4,700 people at level 5. When I say the unified system, we have 5 levels of supervision running from probation all the way through incarceration. The first 3 are supervised probation. In some instances, maybe an ankle bracelet, but they're supervised probation in the community. Level 4 is kind of a quasi-incarceration, whether it's a violation center or a community center. And level 5 is 24-hour-a-day observation by correctional staff, 7 days a week. And we have about 4,700 people at level 5 and about another 650, 700 at level 4. And that's inclusive of the 300 that we've sent to Pennsylvania. And then we have about 13,000 probationers and parolees or other people that are on some type of supervised release with the probation and parole staff. Some of our initiatives that we're currently working on in December 4th, 2018, Governor Carney signed Executive Order number 27, which created the Delaware Correctional Reentry Commission. And what that commission does is we're I hate to use the word reform because everyone just throws it around so loosely. We're redoing the way that we do community supervision and that we do planning for supervision from the day of incarceration all the way through the time they're not only re-entered into society, but also reintegrated into society, which are slightly different terms. Some of the things that we've done, I know everyone has heard the past 2 years, it's been all about the riot that happened at James T. Vaughn. But there's a lot of, and that was the worst day in any part of history of Delaware Department of Correction. I can safely say that. But we've also done a lot of good things that people haven't heard about because the media concentrates so much on that incident, and which rightfully so, but there's other things that need to get out there as well. Some of the things that we've done and that we heard from that incident was some of the things we needed to do with some leadership training with our staff, which we've done. We partnered with the Delaware State Police, Capitol Police with FBI leader, the Wilmington University, and a communications organization out of England called Dialogue Associates. And we're reculturing, rebranding our department, and we're all getting on the same goal, doing the same mission toward our dual purpose, which is one is public safety and the other is rehabilitation. And we're in probably the third year of transforming that. And if anyone that's familiar with culture changes knows it takes a good 3 to 5, maybe 7 years to do a good solid culture change. So we're in year 3, and we see the ebbs and flows, and it's going pretty well. We're bringing the staffing levels up. One of the, and I know I should be short, but finish this up. We're getting our staff and security levels up at level 5. But some of the other things we're working on is trying to get more community officers, probation officers, social workers, people like that among our ranks, so that we can fully do the rehabilitation piece that we've been mandated to do, which we haven't always had the resources for over the years. So I'll cut it off at that and let you have any questions later.
I don't have all that. My name is R.L. Hughes. I am very fortunate to be the chief in Georgetown, a small community, 16 miles from everything here in Sussex County. We have a new brewery coming to town, so that's important, I think, for some folks. Ricky. But for a small community, small municipal agency, we have a lot going on in our town. We have a very diverse community, which is fantastic. And our agency is growing. We're in a current hiring process of those folks that are interested in applying, please do. But we are interviewing folks now. We look to hire 2 in September, 2 in March, and 2 in September next year. And you say, well, that's not a lot. That's a lot. When you're going from, when I started 4 years ago, from 12 police officers to looking to get to 28. And so we've changed, one of the big initiatives that I'm very pleased with at Georgetown, and I will be very brief or short, I am, but our hiring. We look for ways to keep people in the hiring process. I think, and the one way that we really did that really stands out as been a real key for us is we interview every person that puts an application in. Now, let me go back and qualify that. Sometimes we do a quick run and they just can never be a police officer. There may be some criminal history, some serious criminal history, they can't do that. But if they may meet that first pre-qualification on that check, we interview everybody. It's arduous, it takes a while to do, but we want to identify those people that have the compassion, the empathy, and the heart, if you will, to do this. We can train you to take the test, we can make you run faster, and we can get you ready. So we have the luxury of doing that at a small agency. Large agencies do not have that luxury yet, maybe someday. But it has helped us change the way we look and sound at the Georgetown Police Department, which I'm very proud of. So I look forward to answering any questions we're rolling with.
I'm definitely not going to be that long. I'm Chief Michael Hertzfeld from the Delaware Capital Police. Delaware Capital Police is unique because our primary responsibility is policing within the 3 branches of government, which is the executive, judicial, and legislative branch. That's where our primary responsibility is. We have authority statewide, and we're in all 3 counties within Newcastle County. The bulk of our officers work in the courthouse, which is the Leonard L. Williams Justice Center, the state building, the Renaissance building. We supplement the medical examiner's office, as well as the old family courts, which is 900 King. In Dover, we have a ton of facilities there. We have 88 state facilities within the Dover area. We have a patrol section, as well as we have a legislative unit, courthouse unit, which handles the Kent County Courthouse, as well as the family courthouse. And then, of course, in Sussex, we're in Georgetown, where the courthouse is in Georgetown. And then we have supplemental patrols. We have 3 canines that are bomb dogs that do bomb detection should there be a call out. And those dogs are utilized statewide in schools, doesn't matter the community. If there's a call out and they're on that team, they do respond for that. Outside of that, Capitol Police, one of the major initiatives that we have, that we work on constantly, is domestic violence, making sure that victims of domestic violence, regardless of your town or where you come from within the state, have the opportunity to come to court safely. And we have a program that we implemented after the homicides in 2013 that has been growing, and so far it's had a 100% success rate because we haven't had any victims of domestic violence not be able to make their way into the court system. So that's our major initiative.
Good evening. I'll certainly be remiss if I don't introduce the rest of my staff that's here tonight. Although I don't make it to every individual county meeting or local meeting, I rely on certainly a lot of our folks up and down the state to do that. But it's always good to get out and meet with members of the public and talk about some of the great work that we do at the Delaware State Police. So first I'll introduce the operations major for Kent and Sussex County, Major Moriarty. Lieutenant Ballinger from Troop 7, he's the Traffic Lieutenant Troop 7. And our newest member of our community outreach team, Sergeant Willett at headquarters. And you guys probably already know Ricky because he's here all the time. And hopefully he's engaged in spreading good things about the Delaware State Police with you and sharing those things with you. I'll just talk briefly about the Delaware State Police, just give you an overall view, because most of you guys are probably already familiar. But obviously we are a statewide agency consisting of about 8 patrol troops statewide, and I'll focus mostly here on Sussex County. We have 3 troops in Sussex County, one being in Troop 5 in Bridgeville, Troop 4 in Georgetown, and Troop 7, hopefully to be a new Troop 7, still in Lewis. So those are the operational units here in Sussex County. Obviously we have a full service mission up and down the state. Our mission changes as the jurisdiction changes. So primarily in the north, we have an operational responsibility for all the industrial areas and all the unincorporated areas of Newcastle County. And then in Kent and Sussex, pretty much the same. So anything outside those local municipal limits are certainly controlled by the state police. So most of these rural roads south of Newcastle County is primarily responsible from the state police. So I'll just talk a little bit about sort of our thought process in terms of where we've been over the last couple of years. It's really what we've tried to focus on is obviously being more effective and efficient at what we do day to day in terms of reducing crime and those things. But I think what we've tried to focus on the last couple of years is really engaging more with the community and doing more community outreach. We've known for years, and we've always tried to focus on that we're only as strong as the people that we work for and work with. And we know we have, I guess, new numbers now, 960,000 citizens in Delaware, and we're only effective when we can work with those communities and make those communities safer. We have about 725 troopers statewide, and we have about 300 civilian employees that work for Delaware State Police. But again, we are only a strong agency when we work with our community partners, other law enforcement in Delaware. We try to find ways to make them stronger through interconnectivity with our intelligence and those things where we can now share crime across jurisdictions, and we can find ways to make our communities know what crime is happening in their areas. And I know some of those things have probably been shared with you through Crime View and some of those things like Nextdoor, things that help us get better acquainted with you. And I always tell our folks, the folks that know us best are the folks that support us the most. And we just got to continue to do a better job of communicating what that is. I think folks understand the police better when we communicate why we do what we do. We don't always do a great job of that, and we can certainly are trying to find ways to do that. And as those things like social media changes and the way that we reach people has changed. And as an agency, we have tried to change with those times, and we're going to continue to try and do a better job of that. And we've got to do that sometimes face to face, which is the best for us. But obviously that's not the way we reach, especially our young people today. Most people don't read the papers anymore. Most people don't follow. I talk to my kids about, listening to the radio. They don't even know what that is. They never listen to the radio. They don't know what the radio is. So we are trying to find ways to reach communities. Our philosophy is simple, and with what we do, again, we got to continue to find better ways to market that. And when I say that, I mean we try to reach kids at the earliest age possible, because we never think it's too early to start recruiting. We start that with our camp at Camp Barnes when kids are 10 years old. And sometimes we have to catch them early before they do things, like you talked about earlier, that may prevent them from becoming police officers, or prevent them from other future opportunities. When we started at Camp Barnes, we worked that all the way through our different programs that run throughout our agency, from Camp Barnes to our Trooper Youth Program, to our Trooper Youth Week, to our cadet program, to our internship programs, to our cadet program, and hopefully at some point being troopers at our agency. But I won't take up too much time. I just wanted to share a couple things, and again, thank you for having us here tonight.
Thank you, Jim. Mr. Drew, Rick? Keeps cutting off on me.
Again, I want to. Again? No. It's not going to work. Again, I want to thank the panel for coming. I just want to let the other law enforcement folks here know we actually have 2 recidivists on this panel. Commissioner Phelps and Chief Hughes have been with us before on other panels. So we thank them for returning, and we invite you gentlemen to come back again another time. But on behalf of the Alliance, a couple of things that we're concerned about in the community is how the Alliance and our members and others can get more involved. And I should offer a couple of disclaimers before I go too far. Number one, I'm a former federal prosecutor, so I have a little prejudice about law enforcement, having been in the trenches, if you will, for a while. And number two, my son has been a member of the State Police Explorers until he went to the University of Delaware, where he's studying criminal justice. So he looks to be a sworn officer someday. In any event, 25 years ago, the federal government passed what was called the Violent Crime and Law Enforcement Act, which set up a standard for community policing and set up an office, what an interesting acronym, called COPS, Community-Oriented Policing Services, to provide initially, I think it was $8.8 billion to law enforcement across the country, but since that time, it's certainly diminished in its outgoing of funds, but it's still been involved in promoting community policing. And one of the things that we're interested in as members of the Alliance, speaking on behalf of the steering committee, is what kind of community policing programs do you have in place? How does that touch with what the Department of Corrections is trying to do from the reentry aspect and anticipate solutions for the long term, not just for the short term? So I'm going to turn to any of you that want to answer that and start with community policing. How does it apply in your jurisdiction? And explain a little bit about your methodology. Go ahead, Chief Hughes. They're looking away, so go ahead.
All right, I'm going to set everybody else at the table up for this one. So I've had the very great fortune of working both at the State Police, then I spent some time in the Secretary's Office, Secretary of Safety and Homeland Security. 24 years, 3 months, 27 days State Police, 5.5 years at the Secretary's Office, and then I'm at 4 years and 1 month at Georgetown. I really can't keep a job, so I bounce around. I have seen that there is a difference in the style of policing. I've seen that there's a difference, but I'm also seeing that the styles are starting to merge. So, for example, in the past you would think of your municipal agencies being that more community engaged. For the most part, we would think that, and our state police agencies are large county agencies, not big. That is changing. I am seeing that from where I am. But I'm also seeing a real change in the municipal policing here in Sussex County. So I'll keep my thoughts there, and then I'm sure Nate will expand on what the state police are doing. So in a small community, our community, we're about 8,000 folks according to the census. I worry at Georgetown if the census data that will come out again will be true and accurate because of some things that are going on. Because we believe that our population is much larger than that, and we really believe that. In order for us to engage our community, one of the things I talk about is in hiring. I feel that it's very important that we look and sound like our communities and represent our communities well, and it's important that we do that. So we're working there, and that has been a tremendous help. Like I said, when we first started, we had only one person who could speak Spanish. At our police department, we now have 8 individuals that can do that. I'm still not one of those 8. My old brain has a very difficult time. But I think that's very, very important. So it's key there, so we look and sound like our communities. But then one of the things that was very easy to institute, and I found this to be very important, was foot patrol. We can do that in a community where there's blocks. It's very difficult to do that in a community when it may be a neighborhood of 1,000 homes. It's very difficult to do that. But to get out of the car, walk around with your window down, I tell people too, community policing, people used to talk, well, we need community policing like they had in the 50s. Well, you know, the reason why the cops had the windows down, they didn't have air conditioning. When they put air conditioning in, it kind of ruined the whole thing. But ride around with your window down, get out and do foot patrols. I think that's huge. Engage where folks are. If you're selling a product, you want that product as close as you can get it to your customers, we have a product to sell. We are selling police service. We're not selling law enforcement. We're not selling, a police force. We're selling police service. So put your product as close as you can to your constituents. And so that's a huge part of community policing. Now, to your point, Drew, about some of the grant monies that are out there are some grant monies. In Delaware, we go through the CJC, the Criminal Justice Council, is the clearinghouse. Probably not the right word, because there's another clearinghouse that you have to go through the General Assembly, or through OMB. But that's where we get some of those monies. Those monies do help us with a number of initiatives. We do additional foot patrols. We do our junior police academy, middle school aid. We have 7 schools in Georgetown. A lot of people don't realize there are seven schools there, but we do. We have about 2,500 students that come into our municipality each day. And so we have a cadet, or a junior program, junior police academy, that will start in July. It's going to be 2 weeks this year. And they're middle school age children. Now, I have 2 daughters. I love them dearly. I love them with all my heart, all my life. I'd do anything for them. But when they're in middle school, there are days I didn't like them. That's a tough time. So those 2 weeks, they're challenging, and it's good to be challenged like that. But I think it's very good because those young people are staying involved, because we've started a cadet program, trying to get more people to come along in our cadet. Now, our cadets, they do LOR, listen, observe, report. They don't arrest anybody. They don't write parking tickets. They don't do any of that. They walk around town. They listen, observe, report. If there's a street light that's out, they'll jot that down. They'll do a report, and they let us know, so our Public Works Department can fix that. Again, that's a little thing, but it's a big thing to somebody who lives on that street, or the kids who want to play when it starts to get dark. So those are important things. They go to our communities. We have 2 young ladies, Jessica and Beatrice, right now. You would think that they are movie stars when they go through what's called Kimmytown. I don't know if you're familiar with Georgetown. It's at the east side of town. It's called Kimmytown. And a lot that is primarily a Hispanic community. Jessica and Beatrice are both from Guatemala. And that is not something that folks from Guatemala see, a lot of young women in a uniform. And they are superstars when they go through it. It's been one of the biggest benefits we've received as a police agency. That's really important to us. And then there's the engagement part, because we have a significant senior population in Georgetown as well. So we tailor some fraud type investigations or fraud seminars to that particular group. So it's just being engaged with your community where they are. Not where I think they should be, but where they are, and then finding the right tools to fit.
You want to offer a comment?
I don't think I need that. I'll just expand a little bit on some of our, what I try to encourage, all communities to do is first to be a strong community. I always try to envision it as, from our own perspective. All of us, as law enforcement, we expect at some point to retire from this job and hopefully return to a safe community. So, our goal is to try to make those communities safe while we're here, right? So the way we do that is by, again, educating communities to how they can be safer. And the way we do that is by, one, conveying information that we have that will benefit them. Some of the ways that we've tried to do that in recent times is through programs, like I talked about earlier, like Next Door, where communities are connected. That was not a platform that was designed for police. It was designed for communities to share information amongst community members, and then have a little bit of a window into sharing that with the police. In a sense, if they have something going on in their community, they would notify us, and we can say, okay, this is the response we should have, and then provide that community with some feedback. Help communities build crime watches, safe neighborhoods, those things that benefit those communities. Ways that we also encourage folks to be involved, again, through platforms like Crime View, because Crime View is a platform that I know we've shared with a lot of community groups, where you can go in there and put, sort of a radius around your home and say, every time there's a crime that happens in my community, I want to be notified. I want to get an email that says, a burglary happened, within a 1 mile radius of my house. You have the ability to do that. Just right on crimeview.com, and you can do that. And what that does for us is that makes communities smarter, right? So oftentimes it may be something as simple as we having car break-ins and folks are just not locking their doors. And we just want to get the message, help us a little bit here and just lock your door. Be as responsible as you can be to help us help you. Close your doors. I know we all love for those days where we can leave our doors open and sort of leave the garage door up, and that was great, but we're in a different time. And sometimes that's not always possible anymore, that you can leave your garage doors up, because people will go in and take your stuff. And then you'll call us, and we'll be like, can you at least close the door next time? Help us out a little bit, right? We do a very good job of solving crime, but we do that better when we partner with you to do that. Because you guys, as community, you know your community is better than we do. I mean, I love when you have small towns that we can do foot patrol. Well, some of our troopers cover several miles. It'd be nice to have enough troopers to do that. And oftentimes we have folks that move down from, New Jersey or other parts of the Northeast, and they go, I like those times when police drove by my house. I said, I'd like them to drive by my house a few more times a day too. But unfortunately in Delaware, with specifically as it relates to police officers, we only have about 2,300 in the whole state, but 960,000 citizens. So just give you some sense of, we don't have that many to have one in every community sort of doing foot patrols. But our overarching philosophy is simple when it comes to community policing. And I always tell our folks, we really sort of win hearts and minds, one traffic stop at a time, one community contact at a time. Every time you go to a complaint, if you make that citizen feel like they're the only person that matters, because oftentimes for us, this might be our 10th complaint of the day, right? And it sort of becomes a process. But for that citizen, it's maybe the only time that year in their lifetime where they've ever met a trooper, and you have to leave a lasting impression. One that will, you hope, we try to do with platforms like, Citizen Police Academy, is we educate those people so that every time they may hear something national that's going on, and say, maybe it's another side to the story, right? Oftentimes you see that first glimpse on the news and you go, police should have really not done that. And you get that one perspective. But what we try to do is educate people to understand that it's like every story. And sometimes every story has two sides, and sometimes choose somewhere in the middle. But at least to give you the benefit of that and make you have a little pause and say, you know what? Let's hear the whole story, or let's at least give them the benefit of the doubt, not to jump to the conclusion to assume that the police are always wrong, or that they didn't do something wrong. Because sometimes we do wrong. And we have not always done a great job when we do wrong with holding ourselves accountable. And I know we, as an agency, we do a good job, and oftentimes when we do hold our people accountable, sometimes there's things that prevent us from sharing that specifically directly with the public. And we know that folks are held accountable either through internal discipline, through suspension, through sometimes, unfortunately, termination. The public doesn't always see that. And so we have to do a better job of sort of finding that medium where we can share information with the public, but not at the same time protect our officers and make sure that they are protecting their law enforcement officers' Bill of Rights and protecting our citizens as well, but sharing both that information. Our biggest platforms, I think, still for reaching people are our Citizen Police Academies. Again, we would love to get more and more people involved in that, because people go to that academy and they go, now I understand. Because sometimes when you understand why we do what we do, it changes the dynamic of how you view law enforcement, because when you put yourself in that same situation. And we try to give our people the best training. The way we do that is by looking at what's best practice nationally and locally. And sometimes we learn from every agency, from a smaller agency to bigger agency. I mean, like the chief talked about, sometimes you see those smaller agencies like they're doing more community policing. What we do, we have subscribed ourselves to community policing, we just do it differently, right? We're not going to probably be out on foot patrols because we have such large geographic areas. But we do that through, again, we try to find better ways to do that through electronic media, through our own media coverage, and through sometimes putting out our own message. Oftentimes we rely, on the press to sort of write whatever they want to write, right? And so now we found ways that we have internally now, we have, even on our own distribution, we have about 100,000 followers of our own. So sometimes we actually reach more people than the newspaper reaches by sending out our own message. And sometimes you have to just send out a better narrative, and at least give the people what really happened and get it from our perspective, not always sort of have that sort of newspapers, sell paper spin to it. So we want to sometimes get out as accurate as we can, at least reflect what our opinion is of that particular situation. Or sometimes it's just about educating the public as to what's happening in their communities. So we just got to do a better job of reaching the right people at the right time, the right place. And again, our best solution is to get informed citizens, the people that are willing to come out on a Tuesday night at 7 o'clock and learn, take the time to learn about what the police are doing. So I certainly commend you guys for doing that. And we certainly would love to reach more people, but oftentimes we have community meetings and we'll have only a couple people show up until something bad happens. And that's really not the time to solve problems. The time to solve problems and sort of bridge the gap, is that what we're here to do, is when there is no problems, right? And we've tried to do that internally through our diversity committee, through some of our local focus groups. We developed a focus group in each county to try and look at some of those issues in each individual county and then how we can better address them as an agency. And then bigger part of it is to have them look at some of the things that we're doing internally to see how we can do it better. I don't want to take up too much time, but I just wanted to touch on a couple.
Commissioner, did I see you wanted to say something on this?
Sure, Blessing Hurts wanted to speak.
Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, our community engagement is something that we, like I said, in the past 1.5 years, we've been doing more of. We're trying to be more public, if you will. I don't like to use the word transparent, because there's open interpretation. What we've done is we've done a few things we haven't done before. One is we created a cadet youth academy, which we ran the first one last year, and we're looking to run another one this year. So if you know any children between the age of 12 and 18 that are maybe interested in career corrections, you can guide them directly to our website and or a Twitter account, and they can apply there. And it runs. We're open the applications until June 28th, and the actual academy runs. I don't want to give the wrong dates, but it's in July. But if you go to that site, or if you have a question, you can email me, and we'll get you to the proper people. The Community Relations is running that. In October, we're going to run our first ever Citizens Corrections Academy, which we hopefully some of you folks will apply and come up, and so we can give you, as the Colonel said, positive, real information about what the department is doing. And one thing I've learned over the last 2.5 years is with the media, they call it a story for a reason, because they write a story, and that's what it is, a story. So we want you to get what's really happening and what's going on. Some of the other things we do, like I said, we have a Facebook, Twitter account, which we never had before. We do Operation Safe Streets and Governor's Task Force with some of the other agencies at the table here. Some of the probation officers sitting out in the group there. We partner with different police agencies in different jurisdictions, whether state, city, or county, and they supervise a little bit of probation caseload, and they do a little bit of police work, so it's kind of a combination. We run town halls. I don't only do town halls with my staff. And as you said, this is, I think, my second town hall here, and it came down with the Criminal Justice Council. And again, as the Colonel said, we were in Wilmington about 3 weeks ago. I think we had one real member from the public, from the city. Mostly everyone else was staff or some part of another organization that was there. So we appreciate it when you come out to learn about what we do. It's very helpful for us as well. We have community events. We also have an ice hockey team, if you didn't know. They just started up, and they play at Harrington and University of Delaware. And we're trying to do other things. We're doing numerous sports with the other agencies. We support Special Olympics. Our probation officers are big supporters of that. And we also invite, through the Delaware Correctional Reentry Commission, the public to get involved. And there's a process that you have to go through, obviously, to be a part of that commission. But one of the things that we've done is we've added peers to the commission. And for the people unfamiliar with the term of peers, it's ex-offenders that are still going through reentry or reintegration, and they can help us plan and design what we need to do to help others stay on that path so that they're successful when they reenter and reintegrate. And there's many more things, but again, I don't want to dominate the whole conversation, so.
Chief, you wanted to?
Yes, so community policing for Delaware Capital Police is unique in that, as you know, the state is basically the largest employer, and Delaware Capital Police is responsible for infrastructure policing. So a lot of our community policing comes with our employees, as well as people that come to our facilities to get services. Some of you even come for jury duty, from that standpoint. And it's an opportunity for every police department to do some type of community policing. Should you have a question, connect you with the right agency, which may be Georgetown if you're from there, just so that you can obtain the services you may need. You may see, talking to our officers within that environment where you have to pass through them, you have a question. So community policing from our side of it is making sure that people from the community that are coming in, one, know what they're there for, what they're doing, and if they do have any questions that would go back to wherever their home community is, try to answer them at best, and if we can't, then connect them with our law enforcement partnership from that standpoint to move forward. One of the things we do is, of course, we supplement with social media as well. I think everybody's on social media now, majority of all departments. From that standpoint, a lot of things that happen in your communities spill into our facilities, whether it's a court, whether it's a building where an employee works and she's having a harassment issue, he or she, from that standpoint. So things that happen from there, being able to tell our law enforcement partners and services that are within the community, not only law enforcement, social services, when people are in need from the community, being able to hook them up and connect them with the right people. That's one of the things that we do within our community policing. The other thing is we do workplace violence for anybody within the state that wants to have that type of training. What workplace violence is teaching employees what to look for. Basically, you see something, you say something, that transcends back into the community from that program. So a lot of them do that because we explain to them that safety is everyone's responsibility. It's not just the police, and we can't do it by ourselves from that standpoint. So community policing is a little unique for Delaware Capital Police, but we do supplement it and we do follow through.
Thank you. I'm going to ask a couple more questions, but then you're entitled, including law enforcement here, we'll put a screen up if you don't want to be recognized, to ask questions of the panel in a couple of minutes, so be prepared if you want to come up and ask some questions. But I have a academic question, sort of, that falls in our commissioner's training here and teaching. Some of the criticism of community policing from traditional law enforcement has been that it's trying to make the officers social workers, and that they can't do both. They can't really deal with the social worker aspect of community policing and still enforce the laws. Is that a problem in your departments or in your arena? Go ahead.
I just want to say that we know what they call the father of policing in the United States, Augustus Bolivar, then we know that he thought that police officers should be social workers, and that should be part of their role. And just as our probation officers, they're part law enforcement, part social worker. And I think it works very well because I don't want to speak for the police, but I know that a lot of times, a lot of their role is playing referee in certain situations, trying to resolve different things, and when they have that background or that knowledge, it's helpful when dealing with the public.
Chief?
Well, I have a couple things to say about it. I'm an old guy. I started police work in 1985, and as a trooper, I'm a trooper, not a social worker. I said it. I said that. And I like to think that I've grown a bit, matured some, lost a lot of hair, that's for sure. Yes, we've heard that over and over about police aren't social workers, and that's why I used that term before when I said about police services. Not so much when I look at things now, the way I see the way the world according to me, which is my small little world in Georgetown, is police services. It's not about law enforcement all by itself. It's not about a police force all by itself. It's about police services. Wrapped up in that whole bundle of police services is this social work piece. That's why many agencies, mine included, we've gone out and sought victim services. The state police started victim services, gosh, I don't know how many years ago. It's fantastic. Debbie Reed does a wonderful job running that whole operation. We have victim services. That's something, a piece we were missing. I was missing that to be able to have the wherewithal to handle that appropriately. So we're bringing those experts in. Mental health clinician. We have a mental health clinician on board in Georgetown. We're going after an additional grant to fund that for 2 more years. Fingers are crossed. We've got preliminary good things back that we're going to get that and continue that program. Because mental health is out there, mental health and substance abuse. And I'm not saying that mental health is always something, they're always co-occurring. I'm not saying that, but that expertise needs to be out there. I know that Nate's group, DSP, they're looking at doing some work there as well. We recognize that piece. And when you talk about community engagement, and I talked about earlier, meeting your community, where your community is, those are the services that we need to be doing. And if we're going to be in the business of police services, then you better provide those police services. Now, we also need to take a look, I think the next step is going to be for the type of folks we're hiring in law enforcement or in police services, and then also the types of training and education that we're going to do. And that's another whole bear that we're going to have to tackle. And quite frankly, that's probably going to be after my time. It's a slow movement. But to the point of social workers, yes, we are. And so I'm saying it today. Yes, I am. And so probably not a very good one some days, but yes, we do have to do that. And that's where we are today. I mean, this substance abuse epidemic that we've got going on, we have got to find some answers, and we've got to work together as a community, as a society, and find some answers. And move this thing forward. So we all have to do that together.
Well, I think your daughters will be proud.
Oh, good, real,
Go ahead.
very quickly. And one thing I would caution with the idea that police, corrections, probation should all be social, and he's right, we do all elements of that. But we also have to be careful that we don't expect the police and corrections to do all things for all people. And one of the things, when you said substance use, that's the big one. And I'll say it, and what they're gonna do now, but
Let me move over.
prison is not the place for mental health treatment. Prison is not the place for substance use treatment. Prison is the place where you put bad guys that hurt people, and you want to keep them incapacitated out of the community. And we can't expect police officers to respond to know every element of a mental health issue, and we can't expect them to know every element of the substance use issue. Now, there are some where they can refer on that, but we can't expect everyone to be experts in every area when they're trying to do their jobs. So, and the reason I say prison is not the place for, we offer it because we have a lot of people that need it. We offer mental health because we become the de facto mental health institutions across the country. But when you look for real mental health substance use treatment, you have to be in a milieu where it's welcoming, where it's relaxed, where you can trust, where you can open your soul, where you can do all these things to get treatment. As an offender in a level 5 facility, I'm watching my back, I'm worried about somebody stealing my stuff, I'm worried about my selling on my vulnerabilities so he can take advantage of me later on in life. That's why I say that, not because I'm trying to be ignorant or mean, but there's a place and a time. Now, we offer services, and we do the best services we can offer. But if you really want real substance use and real mental health treatment, we need to find a way other than sending them via the police to prison. And I don't know how you do that right off the top of my head. I have some ideas, but we need alternatives to incarceration, I guess is what I'm saying. Now, when people commit crime, yeah, they gotta do the time for the crime they committed. They have to pay for that. They're debt to society. We also need to realize that if you want real, true substance use, real, true mental health help, those are the places where these people need to be. And we can't shake our finger at every police officer or correctional probation officer that doesn't understand every single mental health or substance use issue when they're dealing with a person for the first time. So, I'll shut up.
No, I agree completely with Perry. And unfortunately, the Department of Corrections historically has been the place where there was no place else to go. And so that's what the police would do. They would take the substance abuser or the mental health person in the mental health crisis. That's where they would end up. There would be a warrant and they would end up in jail. To Perry's point, he's absolutely spot on. What I'm referring to is, and part of that was there was no resources. And let's just be honest here in Sussex County, there was no resources until very recently. Things have started to change. We're moving in the right direction, I think, with the community resources. Study after study after study is coming out and saying about community being the place for the mental health piece and the substance abuse, and through some corrections. I'm still having a hard time getting my old brain around some of those, just being honest. But we see that there, and so what I'm looking to do with our police agency and our mental health and our victim services, not more so with our mental health clinician, is being that resource to find those places. We've just gotten to the point where now a mental health clinician can actually have some resources in Sussex County. Before, it was always to go to Newcastle County, taking someone to Newcastle County. And so that's where we really need, because I think the question was asked, I think, Drew, about how the Alliance can help. We need those resources. So it's not just, I have a couple other ideas where you do, but on that one, getting those resources. And I think this group, quite frankly, has been helpful in that arena, because I think it's got some of our folks in the General Assembly start to pay attention to it. And we're seeing that. I have the luxury of sitting on and I do, enjoy is the wrong word, but it's enlightening to sit on the Behavioral Health Consortium, the Lieutenant Governors, and to see the different groups, the different resources that are out there, trying to get their heads around how do we work together, because it's a big one. And we have lots of resources, but we're in silos all over the place. We're trying to get that around. And that's going to be, that's why I say I worry that it's going to be beyond my time, but I think it's coming. That future's out there.
I think the speaker still has an idea in Lewis for some rehabilitative services when the lieutenant leaves her home and goes to a new home. Either of you like to comment on this briefly?
I'll make a brief comment. So my background is from a municipal department, small municipal department, 17 members from Newcastle City Police. And, you know, getting on earlier in my career and going through the Wilmington Police Department, Sir Robert Peel was one of the quotes that was, one of the gentlemen that was quoted in saying that the police are the people and the people are the police. I think he absolutely meant 100% that we're social workers from that standpoint. And I try to strive to that when I work the street from that standpoint. And I think moving forward where I'm at with Capitol Police, we're in a different situation because we're non-traditional. Our environment is not as critical on a daily, constant basis in the sense of going to a complaint and only being called to bad things. A lot of the officers here and the departments here, they get the traditional calls. They're not getting the calls or the person calling just to say, hey, stop by and get some cookies. My guys at Capitol Police, we're getting cookies and everything. So we're in a different situation where,
Who's writing that down?
where we're able to do a lot more social work than traditional policing, but still able to transcend between the two.
Colonel?
Yeah, I mean, I think I always tell our folks that we're in the people business, right? So is social work the people business? I thought social work was so much the people business, I wouldn't get my master's in social work, so it's helped me that much. But yes, I mean, I think we have to, it's not about so much the social work end of it, it's about understanding people. And I think social work helps you understand people, different people, different cultures. And the more you understand that, the better you can do this job. Because we are a diverse state. Our folks are put in situations where the better they understand the plight of the folks in those communities, the better they can serve those people. Does social work help you do that? Absolutely. 100%. I mean, again, it comes down to people, but they spoke earlier to about things. I know we met today, for example, with DSAM. As we tackle things like the opioid crisis, I think we come to realize, and like every probably law enforcement agency in the country, is that we can't arrest our way out of it. You know, we had talking to the major today, we had a gentleman 10 times we were at this guy's house and saved this guy with Narcan. That does not become, how does that not become, whose issue is that, right? We go there 10 times he has no services, 10 times we have no place to be referred him. So then what becomes the fallback? Oftentimes that becomes somewhere at the Department of Corrections, because Delaware, as you said, is challenging in terms of resources. You know, we have to find those social resources, where to put them. We do what we do very well, I think. But you know, we've always been in the arrest business. That's what we've always done. We have to find, and through partnerships with other agencies, folks that are in those lanes of travel. So we don't want to be necessarily social workers per se, because we have people that do that very well. And they already work for the state, right? So we want those folks, and that's why we were trying to do a better job of partnerships with folks like these and partnerships with other resources, that we can make those resources available and guide those people in the right direction. So when we come upon a person with mental health crises, we can refer those people to DSAM and make sure they get the appropriate treatment. And the better them to educate us in a sense that when our officers are responding, they got a better understanding of what they're dealing with. Because we aren't always trained to deal with the best with mental health crises. We give our folks some training in terms of the COPT training that's required, and then some folks go and above that. We've, over the last few years, have gone into CIT training and give some of our officers, up to 40 hours of training. They go through a mental health crisis in partnership with agencies like DSAM and other partners that provide, funding for those things. But we are trying to do a better job of that. And the way we do that is continue to focus on what we do well. We try to do things like, obviously violent crime reduction, traffic reduction. But at the end of the day, we still are running across people. And let's face it, when folks can't figure out what to do, who do they call? They don't call social workers, right? They don't call DSAM. They don't call these other agencies. They call the police. We got to figure it out. And oftentimes we have to figure it out at 3 o'clock in the morning under not ideal conditions, right? And so when we have those resources and other agencies willing to partner with us, we can at least have some way to direct them. And that's why we created programs like Victim Services years ago. We found ourselves in the middle of the night trying to explain to a person, what happened to their loved one. Sometimes police weren't the best people to do that. We weren't always the best people to say, your loved one's not coming back. And we had to bring in, victim services folks that come and explain that and make sure they had services available to those people so they can follow up with them either the next day or right there that night. And they'll come out in the middle of the night for every agency now throughout the state. Some of those folks work directly for the state police, but they make themselves available to all the municipal agencies up and down the state. So when those crisis moments occur, rather than being through a death of a loved one or through some other services that they need, these folks are trained social workers that work with us in partnership that have the right resources, have the right education, have the right training, you know, to bring those people to the right place.
I'm going to take a tack from what you just said that I think is relatively commonly accepted, which is we can't arrest our way out of the drug problem, and expand that a little bit to say the following. All of your colleagues and you have a unique perspective on the root problems that we're all facing in the community that go to law enforcement too often, because 911 is the number you dial, that go to street incidents or other confrontations, and yet we deal with after the fact too often. So I'm going to ask you to put on your thinking cap. If we're trying to deal with the root problems going forward, as opposed to solving or addressing an issue after it's happened, what should we be doing as a community? What should our law enforcement officers and leaders be doing to help us address the underlying problems based on your knowledge, expertise, and unique experience in dealing with a wide variety of problems that probably nobody else in the state of Delaware on a regular basis has to deal with? And I'm going to start with the Chief of the Capitol Police. I just have to move it around. I want to,
I'm good. Because, again, more importantly, I'm a member of a community. I live in a community as well. So while I may wear this uniform that's up here and I'm speaking to you tonight, I still take this off when I go home, and I'm a member of a community. I'm a member of a community that's facing an opioid crisis as well. And just like you, I sit there and ask myself, you know, what can I do more, you know, outside of just where I'm at. So I think all of us can answer that question, and anybody in the room can answer that. And I think it goes back to, for me, when I drive through my neighborhood, you know, it's building the relationships within the people that are in your neighborhood to see something and say something. You know, we have ponds in the neighborhood that I live in. If somebody's sitting at the pond and the car's been there too long, then we say something, you know, and if it means 2 community members or, you know, them coming to my house or coming to another officer's house in my neighborhood and, you know, there's a crisis or something, being able to help each other as community members, trying to solve problems within our community first, and then moving outward from there. So that would be my standpoint.
Chief Hughes, you want to go give it a crack?
Root causes. And so now another passion in my life is education, public education. I am a huge proponent of public education. I served on the Indian River School Board for 10 years, and I was on the State Board of Education. Well, we still didn't solve it all, did we? So I didn't do a very good job. But nonetheless, read a book. Read, explore, have our children be at the appropriate reading level, be at the appropriate math levels. And we go and start to say and teach and instill in our children a sense of more. This is not where I'm going to always be, because there are opportunities for me. And I think that that education is key. Now, that's the easy answer. The hard answer is how do we get there? And how do we get our children prepared to be there? And I think there's some good things happening in Delaware around public education and early childhood and pre-K, pre-K, whatever we're calling it. I think Little Tots and different programs. But that's where we need to be. Something happened, and I don't know when it happened in our society, where education kind of lost its focus, in my opinion. We kind of lost our focus on that. And I don't know where that is. And so for our social scientists out there, maybe someone can point to when it seems that it changed. And so we need to get back to where it's okay to read. It's okay to be the smart kid in the room. It certainly wasn't me in school, I can tell you that. But we need to do that, because that gets our children thinking there's more, and they can have that. Then when we start talking about the root causes, we talk about substance abuse, and where does that come from? When did this addicted society, where did this addicted society come from? When you sit down and think about it, we talk about addiction. And there are certain medical pieces out there that talks about addiction, and it's genetic. Well, does that mean that the generations before were addicted? I'm not so sure I understand. I don't understand that. So getting to those root causes, but what is it that causes someone, and I haven't figured out, to take that needle and to stick it in their arm, or stick it between their toes, or stick it wherever they're going to stick it to get high on heroin? Where does that come from? I don't know. And so we're still trying to figure that part out. And so I would like to think the easy answer is, if we know that there's a better way, we wouldn't make those choices. Unfortunately, a lot of our young people don't have the supports that they need. Again, that's something that happened in our society, where the family structure, if you will, changed. Whatever the family structure looks like, it doesn't have to be the traditional looking family structure, but a support system. that change. And so our children sometimes almost can't help themselves, I think. I made a statement once at a county council meeting, and I took a lot of grief over this not too long ago, and some of you may have heard about it. Dan Gaffney apparently had a real joy with this statement. Talked about how I made a statement, one of the council people asked me the nexus between opioids, heroin, and crime. And I said there is a nexus, because oftentimes people who are in the throes of addiction don't even know what they're doing. They can't make a good decision because their brain changes. Well, that's pretty much a scientific fact, that their brain changes, there's a chemical changes going on. Well, Dan had a lot of fun with that at my expense, and that's okay. I have fairly broad shoulders for a short guy, and I'm all right with it. But it does. The brain changes, they can't help themselves. Let's fill that brain up with some good education so that they can have the tools to make a decision and give them the supports that they need so that moving forward we won't have this. Our current epidemic we're in, we're going to have to struggle through this. It's not going to be easy. We're going to have to struggle through it, but we have to treat people as people, humans. They're our brothers and sisters, nieces and nephews, and so we're going to have to work together.
One of the companion, Colonel, before I come to you, one of the companion problems we have in Sussex County, that Chief, you may be familiar with, unfortunately, is the increase in homelessness. And that tied with the drug problem that some or most of them have at various times has really weighed down the system and not given us many avenues of relief, which has also had problems with the other community members and their response to homelessness and even the drug abuse. So I don't want to just focus on drug abuse, because I think there are other root causes or symptoms of the problems as you talk about support mechanism. But Colonel, you want to respond to the broader question about how do we get to the root cause of some of these problems?
Well, I think the Chief did a good job of talking about, some of the social reasons that got us there. And, where we are, I think, in law enforcement, and really as a state, is trying to figure out how do we get beyond it, how do we get to help the folks, and what are some of the barriers that are preventing us from getting there. I mean, I look at even our own growth as an agency. I think, 3 years ago, if you were telling me that Trooper was going to carry Narcan, I was like, we ain't doing that. Because, we didn't think it was a good idea. We didn't think Troopers should be handling Narcan, to be quite honest. And then, a couple short years later, our whole philosophy changed. Like, we need to do this because, again, we can't arrest our way out of it. We also look at things like our own laws that prohibit us from specifically little things that we take for granted. Is sharing with our other partners, right? We talked about why agencies are in such silos. Like, why can't we talk to the folks at mental health and share information about a person that we are giving Narcan to? Well, this Delaware law says we can't do that, right? So how do you fix that? You create legislation that says, police can now share information with mental health folks so that folks can get the help that they need, right? We have laws that says we can't do that. We said laws that we can't, if we give a person Narcan, that we can't then go to DSAM and say, hey, look, this person might need help. Right, you need to call this person and follow up. While those are things that we're working on currently, right? There's actually legislation now to allow us to do exactly that, to allow us to share information with DSAM that now they can provide treatment to these people or follow up these cases. And that's something that we're trying to do for law enforcement statewide, so that every time you run across a person that may have a mental health issue or a drug abuse issue, that they can then check a block, and that automatic referral will go to DSAM and allow them to do what they do better than we do. They focus on treatment and focus on getting that folks the services that they need. But those are the things I think as a community that we can help with is, following those legislation, making sure that those things happen. And then again, like I said, our biggest challenge I think in Delaware, and everybody recognizes this, always is a challenge I think in Sussex County and Kent County, but not as much in Newcastle County, but the resources just aren't there. Somebody walked into one of our state police troops today and said, you know what, I got a real bad heroin problem. I need help. Where can I go? We have no place to take them. Right? I mean, our only resource is like, we can't take you home, you can't stay here unless we charge you with something, right? And then it becomes a prison again. So our goal, in talking with these hands earlier today, is, guarantee us some beds where we can put these folks, or give us some place where they can be referred to treatment, that somebody can follow up these cases, so we aren't out there giving a person Narcan 10 times, because that's a problem. And you don't want to be there 20 times, maybe he won't survive the 20th time. You know when that ends, but educating our public about how we didn't think we would be educating our citizens about giving their relatives Narcan. Right? We didn't think we'd be there 5 years ago, but we are. And so some of it becomes education, educating ourselves as a community, understanding what those challenges are. And at the end of the day, You know, we are brothers keepers. Every community member has to help in some way. It's not a problem that, you know, our social safety net is going to cure by itself. It has to be an involvement of citizens. Like I talked about earlier, we have, 960,000 citizens, right? You can't put that on, the 2,300 police officers we have in the state to try to fix that problem. And, oftentimes, police become that first point of contact because as it sounds, as it is today, we're the only folks that work after 4 o'clock, right? I mean, most of these social service agencies don't work after 4 o'clock. So we're the ones that come into contact with these folks. So we have to find ways of dealing with that situation right now and then finding a way to get that person to some type of services, either immediately when there's a crisis, where they may, have an immediate crisis that needs to be dealt with right now. We need not a police officer to resolve that, other than to make the situation safe, but the person that can then move that person on to the service that they need to get them the help that they need. Because we can't often do that.
Commissioner?
DSAM is Division of Substance Abuse and Mental Health.
Commissioner, you want to comment?
Yeah, and I agree with what everyone said so far, so I'll try not to restate as much as I can, but I'm going to go a little left to center and get philosophical because I want to go back a little bit and see who we really have in prison. And we know that the United States makes up 5% of the world population and about 25% of the prison population in the entire world. Now, granted, other countries do other things, they don't put people in prison. But when we look at the numbers, you break it down and you look at who's incarcerated. You have about 800-some thousand plus African Americans, which we call disproportionate because you probably only have about 12% of the American population, which are of African American descent. Then you have Latinos, and then you have another 1.1 or 2 million poor white people in prison. All of that to be said is that most of the people in our prisons are not millionaires and billionaires. Most of them are poor or working class people. And what does that mean if we go backwards? That was the labor force that's always been in the country from day one until now. These are the people that as technology improves and we don't need them anymore, what do we do with them? So those are those people. One of the questions that some of my research as a college adjunct instructor is, I watched Michael Sandel from Harvard University. He has this class that he teaches to about 1,500 students at one time, if you can believe it. It's called Justice. And one of the questions that he asked is, we're supposed to be a capitalistic economy and a democratic government. But sometimes those lines blend. And sometimes it looks as though we're a capitalistic society and everything is for sale, including justice, including access to education, including access to decent housing, and everyone, no matter where you go, you ask them, they're going to want the same thing. I want a safe place for me and my family to live. I want something to eat, and a good place for my children to grow up. That's just about everybody in this whole country that you would ask. So why can't we accomplish that? And since 1868, we've had the 14th Amendment, which guarantees all citizens equal protection, equal distribution of goods, and equal application of the rules and the laws. And we all know, since 1868, that hasn't been happening. And one of the things in a capitalistic society that talks about opiates, we've seen all different types of things where you have drug companies introduce opiates, and now they need to introduce the cure, and so forth and so on. We've seen people make money off of private prisons. We've seen people make money off of private rehabilitation centers, things of that nature. And we've also seen, to the point about the family structure, during the 80s and 90s, when we had that big war on drugs and was locking everyone up, left, right, and center for 20, 30, 50, 100 years, what you did effectively was, and this is the whole United States, took a whole bunch of fathers off the street, which now their sons are incarcerated, which now their grandsons are the ones out here running around kicking doors in, shooting people. When I started in 1988, there was, quote unquote, kind of an honor among thieves. If you had a group or a gang or whatever, they're not going to come in your house and do a whole lot of damage. Some would, but that's kind of when all that started. But they wait till they catch you on the street and do whatever they're going to do. But now these young boys, they're running your house, they shoot you, me, your cousin, your dog, your cat, everybody in the house, they don't care. And some of that is probably because they didn't have the structure they needed. And so it goes on the other things. Why don't they have the structure? Because of their war on drugs. All right, why do they have war on drugs? They should have been selling drugs. Well, they thought they had to sell drugs because that was the only access to an economy that they had. They didn't have access to the other economy where you go and do it legally, so this is the economy they chose. And it goes kind of in a circle, but a whole lot of different things have led up to it. And I think today, everyone's looking at the police and corrections to say, fix it. Why didn't y'all fix it? Well, we have about 400 years of broken that you can't expect us to fix at a traffic stop, or you can't expect us to visit at a probation visit, or you can't expect us to fix when you send somebody to jail for 5 years, but you don't give us counselors and treatment specialists and psychologists and psychiatrists to resolve those conflicts. Basically, you're incapacitating people. Of course, they're not causing you trouble on the street. They're still doing all the same things in jail. Our correction officers, they have the same type of service calls that the police on the street have. We have burglaries, we have assaults, we have rapes, we have murders, we have everything else within those walls. So they just don't, through osmosis, stop doing what they're doing. And so we need the resources, and that's what we would ask the community. Joint Finance Committee is about to convene in a couple of weeks and determine how the budget. It's too late to get it this year, but next year, through that process, you can go and advocate for more counselors, more probation officers, more police officers, more whatever it is that you need in your community to make your community safe. And I would really say advocate for some of those independent centers where a judge can send someone to, or a police officer can take someone to, as opposed to introducing them in the criminal justice system, which is just going to get them looped in that cycle of recidivism and not getting out because there's not the resources. I say the governor's Delaware Correction Reentry Commission, he did put some staff, give him the staff to do some of those things that he wants done. We could always use more. And I'm sure the community partners, they could use more. So those are some of the things that we need to ask for. And at the same time, we're increasing our training, we're increasing our community relations, we're increasing our awareness and communication with the community and upping our game on leadership. And the thing, and again, I'll just speak for corrections on this point when we talk about correction officers. The minimum standard for correction officers is 19 and a half with a GED or high school diploma. Now, many of our officers have more than that. They have high school, college, some have bachelor's, some have master's, and some are working on their doctorate degrees. But the minimum standard is high school education. And then you send, not you personally, but the system sends the most complex cases where there's medical, mental health, or substance use to those officers and those people and say, fix them. Does that make sense to anybody? So we need to have professionals. Chicago is doing it, Illinois is doing it, and not that I'm advocating for officers to be psychologists, but we need more psychologists, more clinicians, more social workers, more of those type of people that actually know how to deal with these type of situations. The officers are there to provide safety and security. That's their role. That's what we hire them for. We recruit retired military. We recruit retired police officers. That's who we recruit for our safety and security. Some people are under the impression, well, I gave you another 100 officers, but these inmates are still coming back. Well, officers don't do that type of rehabilitation. So in order to get what we need to be, we need to have more of those other people as well. I had when I was a warden at Vaughn, I had 26 counselors, and of course you have people on leave, medical leave, and all that. So basically, you work with 20 and about 2,500 inmates. So that's we often see the people in the uniforms because we recognize them, we see them right away. But the people that do the rehabilitation part, that's what we're really lacking. And we could use your support when you advocate, when you're asking for different things. We need social service specialists, treatment administrators, treatment supervisors, those type of people, probation officers. Those are the people that we need to get the reentry work done. Correction officers do a very good job of security, safety, and of course they do some mentoring because of the close proximity where they are. But they're not trained professional clinicians, which is what you need to tackle some of the problems and some of the issues that you've raised tonight.
The microphone's empty. Nobody stepped up. Uh-oh, Sandy.
I guess this is part of community policing. What are y'all doing about human trafficking?
Colonel McQueen and I were just talking about that today, actually, at the meeting, at the police chief's meeting today. I sit on the Human Trafficking Interagency Coordinating Council, HTIC. Okay. So, it is, I will tell you this, the state police are doing a very nice job, and I'm not saying that because he's in the room, and a whole bunch of them sitting there. but they're doing a very nice job around the training issue of training their troopers about the signs of human trafficking that's going on. Very nice job. And actually, that's one of our discussions today. We're talking about how can we get that training out to the rest of the police agencies. So you have the state police with some pretty good resources that they can do some things like that. With our municipal agencies, mine included, very difficult for those kind of training pieces to take place. Actually, just having a discussion about implicit bias training, we're going to try to do more as well. If we do something around some grants, and we're working on that. But human trafficking, it's out there. Unfortunately, there is some out there. Part of the problem with Delaware is we found out our data collection was not very good on human trafficking. We didn't have a human trafficking section, if you will. It was other stuff, so we weren't tracking that very well. We're doing much better. The Colonel, I know that State Police had a couple of cases that a few cases, unfortunately, they've worked successfully. I don't know how doesn't sound good, but they have worked. So it is an issue. We are aware there is this commission that's out there. The commission is seeking some funding to do some additional pieces. The awareness piece has been out there. The Blue campaign through HSI Homeland Security Investigations. HSI does a nice job with the Blue campaign, which if you go on their website, you can get some of their materials. We have some of that in Georgetown as well. So.
Another question.
Yes, there's 17 police stations in Sussex County, one sheriff's office, and we have the state troopers. I believe all the state troopers have body cameras, but I wonder how many of those police stations are providing body cameras for their police officers?
Municipal agencies, there are a few that have body cameras. We do not have Georgetown. We do not. We have cameras, NVRs in our police cars. So the dash on the dash, they're mounted there. We have a microphone, so it captures the audio wherever that officer goes. So we have that. A decision had to be made, and I made the decision. Do we go down the body-worn camera piece, or are we looking to solve some crime with some external cameras that are fixed at certain locations within our community? And we decided to go that route, and they are working well. And we publicize that. I want folks to know that if you come to Georgetown and you spit on the sidewalk in the wintertime before it freezes, we're going to find out about it because there's going to be a camera that's going to do that. And I want people to know that. So our next phase, we want to add more cameras. Our next phase would be to take a look at body-worn cameras. We have to be fiscally aware of those costs moving forward. Also, I engaged our community talking about either the fixed location cameras or the body-worn cameras. And our community, the reports back to me were that I go out and talk with fixed cameras.
You know, you all have high ideals and you represent your departments very well, but just like with any profession, there are obviously bad apples in the basket.
Yes, ma'am.
And body cameras is a good way to maybe gain the trust of the people that they are safe and they're being protected by the police force. And it seems to be the best way. You have education, you have communication, you have screening, but the best way would be to gain their trust is for everyone to have a body cam on them, because that's a very reliable witness to what actually happens. And there's been many instances within the last 3 years where you all know that people have been, either extreme force has been used on them or they've actually been killed. And for that reason, I don't understand why you don't all have body cameras, and if you don't, why, and what can we do to make sure that you do?
Right. Well, I told you my decision, what we were going to do, but you make an excellent point, and there's truth to everything you said. But I think one piece I will take and just debate with you is I think the best way to build those relationships are to have trust-based relationships and go to your community and talk to them. As I said, we talk to our community, and this collectively is what we decided to do.
Gina, go ahead.
Oftentimes we see in social media the worst of the worst when it comes to policing. And I know there's more to policing than what we see on a lot of our social media sites. But the one thing that I'm concerned with is that for our youth and our young adults is that there's not enough training or education on what to do when you are interacting with the police. And can you tell us what your departments are doing in that arena? Thank you, Nelson.
I might want to let the good past president talk about that, some of the great work that Noble's doing to educate schools up and down the state in partnership with law enforcement agencies up and down the state and how many schools they've been into. But, so I'll let him talk about that real quick, and then I'll talk about what we're doing specifically.
Good evening. My name is Jerry Bryant. I have a call. I'm the past president of NOVA, National League of Black Law Enforcement Executives. And some 5 years ago, NOVA came up with a program where we go out to the communities and we meet with young folks, high school, middle school kids, and we tell them how to interact with law enforcement. It's a 4-stage program that we do. It takes about an hour. Where we first show them a video about the do's and don'ts, things you should do, things you shouldn't do when you're stopped by a police officer. And then we do role playing and we act it out. And we put the young kids in the car, we pull them over, we have them act up in the car, we show them what could happen, and then we reverse the roles. And we put the police in the car and have the kids do the car stuff. And then at the end, we do a Q&A. And we allow these young folks to ask us whatever question they may have about what and how we do our job. We've traveled across the country doing this, just our Delaware Noble chapter. We've done probably close to 70 presentations throughout the state of Delaware. We've traveled to basically every state in the union. We've probably touched over 11,000 kids, both middle school and high school, as well as college. We have not been in, and I've talked with someone in the finance group, we have not been to Sussex County yet. We sent up letters to the superintendent of the schools throughout the state of Delaware, and we got 0 response from Sussex County. So we're not going to stop. We'll be going out again in September. We're going to reach out to all the schools that we didn't do in the state of Delaware and touch these folks. We do an evaluation. We're doing an evaluation at the end of each of our presentations, and they walked away with something. These young kids walked away with something that would keep them alive. If in fact they have an encounter with a law enforcement person, either in a car stop, on the street, in the house, wherever. And that's what we do.
Thank you. Don, did you have a question?
It's kind of related, actually. I heard a story the other night at another public forum about an MD, a doctor in Philadelphia, who is African American, and when he gets into the car, he makes sure that his license and registration is taped to the dashboard. That's the level of distrust and fear that there is in the African American community. That would never occur to me to do something like that. We've just seen 2 instances in the last several months of what at least appear to be police escalation of a problem that probably didn't need to go that far. There happens to be a movement that's just emerging here in Delaware that's been employed in other areas, where instead of having the police investigate themselves and say, trust us, there's a citizen review board that looks at these kinds of instances that would, I believe, improve the trust relationship between the public and the police force, the law enforcement agencies. I'd like to know what you think about that idea.
Colonel, you want to take a
Sure,
stab?
absolutely. Looking at some of the sort of evidence-based research around citizen review boards, it's mixed, right? Some citizens, some states have had what they think to be some success with that, other states haven't. What I'll tell you where law enforcement is sort of going in terms of some of those incidents is they're not so much looking to citizen review boards, they're looking to external agencies to do their investigation. in most of Delaware, for the most part, say for example, with police shootings, in most cases when most of our municipal partners are involved in police shootings, they have another agency investigate those shootings. So they are, in most cases, investigating some of those themselves. So I see nationally that most agencies are moving in that direction in terms of using other police resources, so they aren't investigating their own and reporting on their own. In Delaware, we also have, sort of a joint situation when you have those police shootings, that the Attorney General's office is involved in every one of those shootings and doing an independent investigation, separate and apart from any police agency that will do an investigation. So, as far as Citizens Review Board specifically, I have not seen that in Delaware. I've seen that in a few states, some of the larger municipalities where they have large municipal agencies. But by and large, and looking at state police agencies across the country, I've not seen that be implemented in many state agencies and states that have implemented it in mixed reviews. So in some cases, we still face challenges in a lot of states with respect to law enforcement officers' bill of rights, what we can share with the public, what we can't. And so it's mixed. So I think it would depend on individual agencies to make that decision in individual states.
Any other member of the panel have a different
Oh,
comment?
we, just in Georgetown, we don't have a Citizens Review Board, but we have what's called GPAC, Georgetown Police Advisory Council, and it changes every year. We go out and, well, mostly I select folks to come in and we sit and talk about what's going on. So that's our advisory council. Jane Covington is a very, many of you probably know Jane, is a vocal, and she will tell me what she thinks, and it's good, and I'm glad for that. And so she's always on the council. She's will never change. Jane will always be on the council. But so that's we don't have a citizen review board because there is this over the law enforcement bill of rights thing that's out there in Delaware, but it becomes problematic. But that GPAC I find it to be very helpful to get a good sense of the community, what the thoughts are as to some of the other decision-making processes. So.
Nancy?
I just wanted to draw everyone's attention to our partnership with the Office of Defense Services. We have helped them, they have developed 2 videos and we've been promoting them, one on expungement for juveniles, but the other one is what to do when you're stopped. And they're on our website, they're on the Office of Defense Services website. So I would encourage everyone to look at it. If that's something that the Alliance has done. I wanted to ask the chief from Georgetown, my understanding is that you've been using a social worker in the patrol cars or going out to these. If you could just give us an idea of how that's working and what you've learned from it.
Right. So initially it was that she would do Michelle Robinson, she's wonderful, and she initially was to do some ride-alongs with the patrol officers when they're out there riding. And so we did try that. It wasn't working so well because it limits who she can see and talk to. So what we started doing is really getting the word out through our community. Michelle is available, she's here at these hours. We actually have folks that come to the police department seeking out Michelle. Or if we, today, for example, you brought up, Drew, about the homeless issue. We have a very large housing project that's going to be being built, community being built behind the Walmart, Sun Behavioral in that area, about 400 homes. Some are apartments, condos, some are single family. And we've been working with that group because there are some folks who live in that area, in the woods there. And so we've been working with that group saying, hey, this is going to happen, you're going to have to be ready to move. And so Michelle has been reaching out, trying to find, so this is her social work and mental health clinician, but yet she's trying to find resources for these folks. Well, what we get word today from the contractor, we had hoped they were going to give us about a 4-week window to make the final push. They'll be there tomorrow. So we were out contacting folks again. Now that's, in all fairness, even to the contractor, we've been working with this, and we're trying to work through that. But Michelle will help with those resources, identify folks. Substance abuse is her forte, and she does a really good job of that. And so she has people coming in, and oftentimes, as it happens oftentimes, just because a person reaches out for help and they go for a few hours, it may take several times before that's going to happen. So we're finding that she is being embraced by the community. People are knowing that she's there, and she's being able to give out those resources.
You have a question?
My name is Lucina Wise, and I work at GW Carver in Frankfurt. I've been there 18 years, and we're talking about substance abuse as far as drugs, alcohol, vape pens. We deal with it all the time, and we work with middle school kids and high school kids, and we see this every day. But we try to talk to them and tell them what they need to do and what they need not to do, you know, but that's a big problem in school. And I don't know, can you give me some answers for this? Because we're collecting vape pens, we collect, they tell the kids not to bring water bottles. They have to be capped, not open, because that's district policy. And then what they'll do, they'll put alcohol in the bottles. So we do not let any kid come in with an open bottle. And one of our advisors say that they can't, they can't, we have to check their bags. We have a metal detector, so we have to check. We're the only school in the district that has a metal detector. And we have to check their bags. And, because we want to be safe and we want everybody else to be safe. So, but that's a really big problem. And we're trying to keep these kids from going to prison or going to Stevenson. You know, and this is what we tell them. We tell them this is your last stop here. So that's a big problem that we have in the school.
You're asking in terms of how to control that contraband from coming in? Okay. Now, you do have some administrative search rights, but I'll repeat your
Yes, we do.
district attorney,
Yes.
whoever that may be, and ask them what you can and can't do. It gets a little itchy with kids.
As long as the administrator's there, then we have no problem.
You need to know those rules first, but and you probably have some of the same issues we do. And the reality is, as long as you have a human being with a heartbeat, you're gonna have contraband coming in the school. That's the raw truth. It's just the way it is. And I have a 13-year-old daughter. She was asking me one day, Dad, what do you think of I smoked a vape? And I said, okay, how long do you want to be on this earth? But you're right, that's what they're doing in all the middle schools.
Yeah.
The kids think it's cool. I said, why would you want to do that? Well, it doesn't, it's not tobacco in it, it's just the steam or whatever it is. That doesn't make sense to me.
Because we only have them for like 10 days, because I work in camp right now. And I have them just for 10 days. But within them 10 days, I'm on them. You know, because see, in the high school, in the middle school, no bags are checked or anything. So nobody's really safe. They can just bring a knife, gun, or whatever. You know, so we're really safe.
It's a difficult situation.
Yeah, it's yeah.
If I can address it, because Capitol Police, we screen constantly. And one of the things is I told you about workplace violence, which we teach all of our officers as well. And your folks, you know, should you need it, just give me information. I can certainly have the instructors come out and teach that. One thing that we teach our guys is that you're not going to find anything out if you're not communicating and you're not presenting yourself to the people that are coming in and getting to know them. The more that you build relationships, the screening plays no part. I don't know if any of you have seen the HBO special, they just had it on the other night, talking about all the schools in Chicago, how the inner city kids are screened, right? And now they're trying to move that screening to schools that are in suburban areas. And they were doing the correlation between the amount of kids in that environment that screening produces criminals from that standpoint. Well, they ended up going to a school that was the last chance school, and they used screening. And the way that one thing that principal said is that we get to know our students. Their success rate is one of the highest in the country. And the way that they did it was the same way that we teach our program at Capitol with employees that come in every single day, is getting to know people. A person who's going to shut down, you know, or is not the same, that becomes a clue. We have to identify that. We have to ask those hard questions. Are you all right? Anything I can do for you? You know, maybe notify a supervisor in that employee's area to say, hey, Sharon wasn't feeling well today. She wasn't her normal self when she normally comes in. You know, you might want to keep an eye. No different than if we have somebody that comes through screening that's not speaking to us, a member of the public, being social. And again, as I said on our end from Capitol Police, that's what we do. We do screening. And we get requests from other departments during events to come do screening because our officers are trained to that point, not just to run a machine, but to recognize behaviors of people as they're coming in, and if there's a behavior that is in question, to certainly notify someone. So in your situation where you have these kids coming in, it might be an avenue to see how you can embrace them,
Because I think
find out something
the ones
about
that
them.
they do have the drug problem, they have the counselors that come to them,
Yeah.
talk to them. And that's the only solution that we have right there. That, and that's it.
But again, you don't have to be a drug counselor to talk to somebody.
You know,
So,
no, I talk to them all the
yeah.
time, because we do have to build that relationship with the kids,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. So that typically is what works, but like I said, we offer that program statewide, and we go out and train pretty much everybody in reference to that. We also train on critical incident stress management as well. Law enforcement, a lot of law enforcement officers do that. We have that program. We have officers, just like every department does, that's trained. It's called CISM, that we go out to traumatic events in the sense that we send our officers out to basically talk to people and bring some stability before other professionals get in. But that's something that, you know, your department or your school maybe send some people for training for that, and you take hold of that as well. So you can go from that standpoint.
Well, I do commend the state policeman, because we have one in the school, and he does a great job, you know, and he has to build that relationship with the kids too. And I commend all of you guys that are state policemen and these here, you know, because you're doing a great job, you know, because if we didn't have you, who we gonna have?
All right, I get the privilege of one last question.
And if I could address one thing, I wanted to address the gentleman's question over here, because I think he touched on something that I'd like to express is, when you talked about the gentleman, African-American descent, that puts his license and stuff on the dash, part of Noble, and I'm the second vice president currently right now of the Noble organization. One of the things that we do when we talk to the kids is we talk to them about where to put their license and registration, and we even have the, what do you call those, the visor. So you put the visor above, and then your license and registration, everything is up top, so that if the kids did purchase that, or parents purchase that, and the kids keep their ID there, the officers are constantly looking for hands, because these are the only things that are gonna kill us, right? Is what people do with their hands. You know, not unless you're really good with your feet and you can shoot a gun, but for the most part, your hands. So a kid reaching up top, getting that allows the officer who's coming up to the car to see where their hands are. Even if they're asked for it, they're reaching above them from that standpoint. So there's a couple of different things out there.
That's never an issue for me.
You're right, because that's culturally based. But I'll say this to you, that is culturally based. That's been an issue for me, okay? And I wear the uniform. And I'll say this to you is that even though that was a culture base of trust, and it's stemmed from years and years before all of us got here in law enforcement, okay? And that became culturally based. I believe the chief here deals with it with Guatemalans in his area. There's certain things within culture that you just can't turn around by putting services to it. There's things that have to systematically happen. But more importantly, and I'll take you all back to what the chief said, education. If my kid knows to keep his hands above where the officer can see him, turn the interior light on when he gets stopped, then that officer is going to be in a different frame of mind when they're coming to the vehicle. My kid knows that. Both my kids know that, right? I have boys. So they know that, but other kids from other communities don't. So the problem comes with how are we educating them? And as we said, from the Noble standpoint, we're trying to get into all the schools so that we can educate them, but that also comes from the other videos that are out there of what to do that are good videos. And then you as community members, again, we're not going to do this thing all by ourselves. Police can't be responsible for all of it. You heard the colonel say there's 2,300 cops in the state with almost 1 million people. So we're not going to reach everybody, and it's not just juveniles. It's some adults too that don't know. And without knowledge, they're not ever going to get past it. We're not going to turn this aside.
They have to worry about being shot to death.
Say again?
Their hands in the wrong place.
Yeah,
Say that one more time.
she was saying, why should we be concerned about where our hands are? I'm not concerned where my hands are. I've never educated my son or my daughters where to put their hands.
And again, it goes back to culture.
Well,
it goes back to more than culture, it goes to
Yes.
racism.
That's why we're here this evening, right? I mean, this is Southern Delaware for racial justice. I mean, but you can't expect, and I certainly don't expect as an African American male for racial injustice to be turned around by the police. I don't put that on my family and my kids, and I think we can't put that on police. We have to do that as a society together. And going back to what I said earlier, when you see something that's wrong, then don't walk away from it. Say something. Be that champion for a person who doesn't want to speak. So if you know, when you asked us these questions as community, and you come forward about what can you do, if you see that injustice, just don't let it go. Say something. Be a part of the change. And as we change as a whole, that's what's going to steer this thing. It's not the 2,300 cops from Delaware, right? It's not just the number of minorities that make it to leadership positions. It's all of us.
Well, why don't you wear body cameras so you can at least see?
So fortunately for me, with body cameras, I'm going to tell you, my officers are in courts. There's 430 cameras in one of the courts. So we pretty much cover everything. So from that standpoint, but again, it does come down to, you know, a camera is not going to resolve an issue for an individual that is not able to speak to someone. If we have an officer that's not able to communicate well, then that officer is going to utilize the tools on their belt for people to come into compliance. So a camera is a vessel, but again, it's just another tool. We really need to work on the fundamental things that's there with officers, social workers, and getting the right pieces in places in order to steer this and change the actual culture of that.
I'll come in on one thing real quick, if you don't mind. One of the things that was passed last year in the legislature was to implement interaction with the police into driver's ed classrooms. So that now has become part of the driver's ed program. So it won't only be going to minority kids, it'll be going to all kids. And understanding what that interaction is, understanding what their rights are in terms of civil rights, and understanding what the expectation would be from the police. So that will now be incorporated not only in driver's ed classes, but also in driver improvement classes, because you know, some folks did the driver's ed 100 years ago, but most of us will maybe go get the insurance discount and go back through driver improvement. So somehow reaching those people on both ends. So I think they've made some strides in that with that respect. And again, I think with body cameras, it becomes a balance, right? It becomes I think Delaware's been responsible in the sense that we collectively as chiefs in Delaware and as part of COPT have moved part of that forward. And so the platform has been set to establish body cameras in the sense that now all agencies agree what that platform should look like. How do we share information across platforms between every police agency in Delaware and the Attorney General's office? How do we look at overall, how do we store that video? How do we maintain that over the long haul? Sometimes it's easy to go out and buy body cameras. Body cameras are easy. We piloted body cameras 2 years ago. And the body cameras is the easy part. The hard part is the management, the storage, and the retrieval, and how do you maintain that, and how do you continue to pay for that year after year, and when you have other costs like cars, people, and challenges. So it becomes a matter of resources. It becomes a matter of looking at over the long haul. Body cameras still haven't been around that long. So when you start to look at some of the evidence-based research, okay, what do we hope to accomplish? Do we hope to accomplish more community trust? Is that the only way we can do that? Is there other ways we can do that? I mean, Delaware State Police, for example, has 100% coverage in all of our police cars. By and large, most of our interaction with the public is in our police cars. We stop more cars than, I'll say, anybody else. I can say that real comfortably. And that's where most of our interaction occurs. Do we get out of our cars and go in the houses? Yes, that absolutely happens. But then you have to deal with all those other issues, with privacy issues from the people, from the residents. So it's a balance, but I think we've tried to move forward in a responsible way in the sense that we try to create an RFP for now, if any agency goes out and buy those body cameras, what those requirements are for that agency, so that every law enforcement agency goes, oh, let me go out and just get a grant and buy some stuff, right? Is it something that you can go out and buy that now the AG's office has access to? Is it something that we can present in court? Is it something that we can maintain over the long haul? And is it something that we can maintain in terms of storage? And how do we retrieve that? And how do we responsibly train our officers how to use that equipment appropriately, and how do we share that information with the public? So it's not a matter of just going out and buying body cameras. That's the easy part. One thing about police, we are probably like no other profession in that even though we say we don't accept change, we've probably changed more than any profession out there. And our people will adjust to what we ask them to do. And body cameras will be no different and I think, it's like anything else. Over time it will be here, but I think we are being responsible in the sense that we're watching what's happening nationally and making sure that we learn from that and move forward in a responsible way.
Do I agree on a lot of things?
My last question, I'm going to ask the last question, and I want a single answer from each of you, if I can, please. The Alliance is engaged with you and others in the law enforcement community. We've been involved with the CJC in their strategic planning. We've been involved in other missions like the expungement mission and other things with ODS. I'd like to get from you as one example of what the Alliance can do to work with you to improve the delivery of justice in Sussex County. And I'm going to start with the commissioner.
Sure, I think that, as stated before, the Delaware Correctional Reentry Commission, we have contacts, Chief of Research and Planning, and the Chief of Bureau of Community Corrections. They're looking for community involvement to help them design and guide the way we're going to do reentry for the state of Delaware. And reentry covers and encompasses a lot of things: housing, education, all those type of things, work once a person is released. So if you can get involved with that, and then go down to General Assembly at the right time of the year, which will be this fall, and advocate for some of those things we need, then that's how you can help.
All right. Chief?
Yeah, I agree with the advocacy part of the other resources. Specifically for Georgetown, I would like to have a Citizens Police Academy. I would like to do that. We get a lot of revenue that comes in by way of donations from folks. I'm not saying get out your wallets right now, but later. We'll pass the plate later. But I would, perhaps there's room, I'm sitting here, I was thinking about this, there may be room for the Alliance and Georgetown Police Department to do something with citizens in Georgetown.
Yeah.
And I don't know what we call it. We don't call it the Georgetown Police Citizen Academy. We call it Awareness Academy. The Alliance Academy. But maybe there's room there, because I think that the partnership could be there. We could be seen at the same table, at the same place, and we can even be seen disagreeing, and that's okay. But maybe that's a good partnership in Georgetown, because as I said, we have a very diverse community, and I think that would be a very good thing.
Thank you. Chief?
So Capitol Police, from a standpoint, the Chief Justice for the state has an Access for Justice committee. I think the Alliance could certainly be involved in supporting some of the changes that come out of the Access for Justice. You know, from that standpoint, be able to look at those critically and determine if there are racial issues or racial issues that weren't discussed, or there was some other impact from those racial issues. So getting involved from that standpoint, they do have a number of different entities that are involved in that, but they could always use a secondary look. And if the opportunity presents itself, which I believe this Chief Justice will, present it out to communities, it'd be important that this alliance participates in that.
We did have the Chief Justice speak to us.
Yes.
Colonel, you get the last word.
Well, I think, as everybody here thinks, is probably the future is our children, right? So our biggest program that I think we undersell the most for Delaware State Police is our involvement in Camp Arms. So we've had Camp Arms for about 60 years. It's a free camp to kids up and down the state that we run every summer for 6 weeks, boys and girls. We have grown that program from about 60 kids a week to about 100 kids a week. And we still sometimes have kids, where we don't have that camp full, and it's grown and it's gotten better every year. And we are starting to get to a point where we sometimes have to turn away kids, but we've gotten better when we've opened up more cabins to accommodate those kids. But I think the Alliance can help in educating the public about some of the great things that we do and making those resources available. I mean, Camp Arms is a free camp for kids that, probably aren't going to go to Disney World this year. But when I go to that camp every year, and I hear those kids come back for their third year, and they're like, "Can we stay one more year?" And we age them out at 13. They're like, "This is it for me. I don't have another camp." And while we want to expand it to 14-year-olds, we don't, because we know we're going to have kids from 10 to 13 that'll fill that camp every year. But then we have folks right here in Sussex County that have never heard of Camp Arms, and it's hard for me to believe that, but it's one of those resources that is very much underutilized, and that I think the Alliance can certainly help with. One, educating the public about the resources that are available to them. We do have a Citizens Police Academy that we run at least once a year in Sussex County every year. And sometimes that community Citizens Academy is full, and sometimes it's not. Our last Citizens Academy here in Sussex County was pretty full and well attended. But again, we would like to see that way every time. And our biggest challenge, if I had to name one thing, it would be reaching those underserved communities. Sometimes we'll have a Citizens Police Academy and we'll have a full academy, but it won't be sometimes a single minority in that group. Right? So we do a good job of reaching out to folks, but sometimes we don't always reach the right people to get that message to them about some of the good things that are available, to educate them, to teach them about what the police is doing or not doing, and then just to better educate them as citizens.
Well, keep us all on your mailing list so we can stay attuned to what's happening. On behalf of everyone who's here and those that aren't, I want to thank you for taking the time tonight to join us.